Thank you for choosing apparacity.com. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe. And if you are able to, donations can be made at hallofshadowsradio.com and apparacity.com. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Hall of Shadows.
Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. Read by Sal Santorelli. I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more, penniless and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable. I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal indeed was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I can only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awakened, it was to discover myself half-sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime, yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to be almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions which for innumerable millions of years had laid hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me, that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, strain my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, The ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night I encamped, and on the following day still traveled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I first espied it. By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it appeared from a distance, an intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbon moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps where no light had yet penetrated. All at once my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the new bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was a merely gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself, but I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with the sensations I cannot express, for despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, showed weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me, and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things, which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Dore. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulmer, they were damnably human in general outline despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seemed to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures was shewn in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or sea-bearing tribe, some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Pilthan or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing while the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then suddenly I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like, and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. On my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm some time after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist, and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god. But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideous, vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering in its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likeness on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausting mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
Hall of Shadows is produced by Michael J. Rocco, directed by Kristina and Michael J. Rocco. For apparacity, we bid you good night. Thank you for choosing apparacity.com. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe. And if you are able to, donations can be made at hallofshadowsradio.com and apparacity.com. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Hall of Shadows.
There is a Reaper by Charles V. DeVette. Read by Michael J. Rocco. Doctors had given him just 1 month to live. A month to wonder what comes afterward. There was one way to find out. Ask a dead man. The amber brown of the liquor disguised the poison it held, and I watched with a smile on my lips as he drank it. There was no pity in my heart for him. He was a jackal in the jungle of life, and I was one of the carnivores. It is the lot of the jackals of life to be devoured by the carnivore. Suddenly, the contented look on his face froze into a startled stillness. I knew he was feeling the first savage twinge of the agony that was to come. He turned his head and looked at me, and I saw suddenly that he knew what I had done. "You murderer," he cursed me, and then his body arched in the middle and his voice choked off deep in his throat. For a short minute he sat, tense, his body stiffened by the agony that rode it, unable to move a muscle. I watched the torment in his eyes build up to a crescendo of pain until the suffering became too great that it filmed his eyes, and I knew that, though he still stared directly at me, he no longer saw me. Then, as suddenly as the spasm had come, the starch went out of his body and his back slid slowly down the chair edge. He landed heavily with his head resting limply against the seat of the chair. His right leg doubled up in a kind of jerk before he was still. I knew the time had come. "Where are you?" I asked. This moment had cost me $60,000. 3 weeks ago, the best doctors in the state gave me a month to live, and with $7 million in the bank, I couldn't buy a minute more. I accepted the doctor's decision philosophically, like the gambler that I am. But I had a plan, one which necessity had never forced me to use until now. Several years before, I had read an article about the medicine men of a certain tribe of aborigines living in the jungles at the source of the Amazon River. They had discovered a process in which the juice of a certain bush, known only to them, could be used to poison a man. Anyone subjected to this poison died, but for a few minutes after life left his body, the medicine men could still converse with him. The subject, though ostensibly and actually dead, answered the medicine men's every question. This was their primitive, though reportedly effective method of catching glimpses of what lay ahead in the world of death. I had conceived my idea at the time I read the article, but I had never had the need to use it until the doctors gave me a month to live. Then I spent my $60,000, and 3 weeks later, I held in my hands a small bottle of the witch doctor's fluid. The next step was to secure my victim, my collaborator, I preferred to call him. The man I chose was a nobody, a homeless, friendless, non-entity picked up off the street. He had once been an educated man, but now he was only a bum. And when he died, he'd never be missed. A perfect man for my experiment. I'm a rich man because I have a system. The system is simple. I never make a move until I know exactly where that move will lead me. My field of operations is the stock market. I spend money unstingingly to secure the information I need before I take each step. I hire the best investigators, bribe employees, and persons in position to give me the information I want. And only when I am as certain as humanly possible that I cannot be wrong do I move. And the system never fails. $7 million in the bank is proof of that. Now, knowing that I could not live, I intended to make the system work for me one last time before I died. I'm a firm believer in the adage that any situation can be whipped, given prior knowledge of its coming and, of course, its attendant circumstances. For a moment, he did not answer, and I began to fear that my experiment had failed. "Where are you?" I repeated, louder and sharper this time. The small muscles about his eyes puckered with an unnormal tension while the rest of his face held its death frost. Slowly, slowly, unnaturally, as though energized by some hyper-rational power, his lips and tongue moved. The words he spoke were clear. I am in a tunnel," he said. "It is lighted, dimly, but there is nothing for me to see." Blue veins showed through the flesh of his cheeks like watermarks on translucent paper. He paused, and I urged, "Go on." I am alone," he said. "The realities I knew no longer exist, and I am damp and cold. All about me is a sense of gloom and dejection. It is an apprehension, an emanation so deep and real as to be almost a tangible thing. The walls to either side of me seem to be formed, not of substance, but rather the soundless cries of melancholy of spirits I cannot see. I am waiting in the gloom for something which will come to me. That need to wait is an innate part of my being, and I have no thought of questioning it." His voice died again. "What are you waiting for?" I asked. "I do not know," he said, his voice dreary of the despair of centuries of hopelessness. "I only know that I must wait. That compulsion is greater than my strength to combat." The tone of his voice changed slightly. "The tunnel about me is widening, and now the walls have receded into invisibility. The tunnel has become a plain, but the plain is as desolate, as forlorn, as dreary as was the tunnel, and still I stand and wait. How long must this go on?" He fell silent again, and I was about to prompt him with another question. I could not afford to let the time run out in long silences, but abruptly the muscles about his eyes tightened, and suddenly a new aspect replaced their hopeless dejection. Now they expressed a black, bottomless terror. For a moment I marveled that so small a portion of a facial anatomy could express such horror. "There is something coming toward me," he said. A beast, a brutish foulness. Beast is too inadequate a term to describe it, but I know no words to tell its form. It is an intangible, an evasive thing, but very real. And it is coming closer. It has no organs of sight as I know them, but I feel that it can see me. Or rather, it is aware of me with a sense sharper than vision itself. It is very near now. Oh God, the malevolence, the hate, the potentiality of awful, fearsome destructiveness. Its very essence, and I still cannot move. The expression of terrified anticipation centered in his eyes, lessened slightly, and was replaced instantly by its former deep, deep despair. "I am no longer afraid," he said. "Why?" I interjected. Why? I was impatient to learn all that I could before the end came. "Because," he paused, "because it holds no threat for me. Somehow, someday, I understand, I know, that it too is seeking that for which I wait." "What is it doing now?" "It has stopped beside me, and we stand together, gazing across the stark, empty plain. Now, a second awful entity, with the same leashed virulence about it, moves up and stands at my other side. We all three wait. Myself, with a dark fear of this dismal universe, my unnatural companions, with patient, malicious menace. "Bits of," he faltered, I can name it only aura, and go out from the beasts like an acid stream, and touch me, and the hate and the venom chill my body like a wave of intense cold. Now there are others of this awful breed behind me. We stand waiting, waiting for that which will come. What it is, I do not know." I could see the pallor of death creeping steadily into the last corners of his lips, and I knew that the end was not far away. Suddenly, a black frustration built up within me. "What are you waiting for?" The tenseness and the importance of this moment forcing me to lose the iron self-control upon which I have always prided myself. I knew that the answer held the secret of what I must know. If I can learn that, my experiment would not be in vain, and I could make whatever preparations were necessary for my own death. I had to know that answer. "Think! Think!" I pleaded. "What are you waiting for?" "I do not know." The dreary despair in his eyes, sightless as they met mine, chilled me with a coldness that I felt in the marrow of my being. "I do not know," he repeated. Yes, I do know." Abruptly, the plasmatic film cleared from his eyes, and I knew that for the first time since the poison struck, he was seeing me clearly. I sensed that this was the last moment before he left, for good. It had to be now. "Tell me, I command you," I cried. "What are you waiting for?" His voice was quiet as he murmured softly, implacably, before he was gone. "We are waiting," he said, "for you." Hall of Shadows is produced by Michael J. Rocco, directed by Kristina and Michael J. Rocco. For Apparacity, we bid you good night. Thank you for choosing apparacity.com. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe. And if you are able to, donations can be made at hallofshadowsradio.com and apparacity.com. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Hall of Shadows.
Oh my God. I can't keep up with this. It's like they never close downstairs. I get it. I need a place. I have to obviously sleep somewhere. I need some sense of privacy in my work. And they gave me a really good price. The rent is ridiculously low compared to anything around. But my God, there are moments when I want to go downstairs, walk into that bar, and start swinging for the freaking fences, man. Let me just keep busy. What do I have here? Okay. I'm not taking this one. Okay, so this guy is offering a ton of money for his case, but it's not worth it. Jackie, if you've learned anything, you take the money when you know you're going to solve the case or exit alive. This one, no. Okay. Next. What is this? I can do this, maybe. I mean, what is she paying, though? She has nothing. This is another charity case, Jackie. You're going to be doing this for who knows how long, and they have nothing. If you get $100 out of this, you'd feel guilty about taking it. But she's just a teenager. She's a kid. What has she been gone for, like, about a week? The police have been looking. They're not finding anything. And her mother is a disaster, man. You're going to do it. You're going to end up doing this. And you know what? It sucks. Before that, what else do we have? Let me just... Oh, my God. No, I am not doing this one either. Forget working with lawyers. I'm not again. No. Oh, God, my head is pounding. I got to get some sleep, man. I can't be doing this. I got to go out tomorrow and check on some of these. All right. For now, let's put everything away. Let's try to get a couple hours of sleep. And as far as this one... what's her name? What's this kid's name? Oh, let's see. Jennifer McNamara. Okay. Easy enough. Call her mother tomorrow. But for now, let's get to bed. Oh my God. It's still going down there. I'm never getting to sleep. Oh my God. I'm going to do it. Here we go. I'm getting some whiskey and we are going to do an all-nighter. Oh, what would she say right now? She wouldn't have to say anything. She would just look at me. Maybe she would hide the bottle. She used to hide the bottles from me, and I always found them. Of course, an alcoholic can always find the bottles in the house. But sometimes I'd pretend I couldn't. And not only would I get what I wanted for the night, but I would also dissuade her from drinking. So I was a decent enough man, at least, to keep her from becoming me. Okay, it's like almost half good. Oh, God, shut up. I gotta say something about this. I'm just not doing it right now, but this is ridiculous. They don't even help. Anytime I question the bartenders or ask if anyone's seen this, they're so friggin' not helpful to me. What? What the hell is that? What? Alright, so I'm dreaming now. What do you want? You'd have to do a little better than that, man. After I already mentally decided to take the case for you show up in my bedroom as a ghost. I'm sorry to be disrespectful to the supernatural presence in the room, but I already said I'm gonna do the case, and if you knew me, you knew that I was gonna do it for the crap money that your mother has to pay me, okay? So why are you here? I mean, hey, wait. Maybe you're gonna give me some easy information so I can just go into your mother's tomorrow and just be like, oh, by the way, she died. Hey, pay me. No, wait till she pays me. I'll get her to sign some form or whatever. And then I'm going to be like, oh, by the way, your daughter's dead. You know how I know that? Oh, no physical evidence. Nothing that will hold up in court. But Jennifer actually showed up in my room overnight when I was already having trouble sleeping because of the loud jerks in the bar downstairs every night. And she gave me nothing. She just said, boo, and she scared me, and, well, she tried to scare me. She didn't know my ex-wife, so she thought she could scare me. And she just said, look for, what are you doing here? Look, is this one of those, you must dig up my remains and bury them and use holy water? Like, no, sorry, that's not what I do. I don't believe in you. I don't actually believe in you. You're either a dream, or I smoked way too much weed, or I drank too much, or both. Whatever it is, maybe it was the methadone clinics for so many years. But I can tell you right now that you're not actually here. I'm already going to take the case, and I'm losing even more sleep for no apparent reason at all. So, where? Oh, right. So if I do that, if I uncover the caper, you'll go away? Will you go away and leave me be? Let's see what we can dig up tomorrow. Get out. I said goodbye. Or as the Canadians would say, get out. Get out. That was part 1 of Jackie Rhodes' P.I., improv'd by Michael J. Rocco. Hall of Shadows is produced by Michael J. Rocco, directed by Kristina and Michael J. Rocco. For Apparacity, we bid you good night. Thank you for choosing apparacity.com. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe. And if you are able to, donations can be made at hallofshadowsradio.com and apparacity.com. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Hall of Shadows.
I shut my eyes, and all the world drops dead. I lift my lids, and all is born again. I think I made you up inside my head. The stars go waltzing out in blue and red. An arbitrary blackness gallops in. I shut my eyes, and all the world drops dead. I dreamed that you bewitched me into bed, and
Seraphim
suddenly
and Satan's
moonstruck
men,
kissed me quite
Seraphim
insane.
and Satan's
I
men.
think I made you
I
up
shut my eyes,
inside my
and
head.
all the world drops dead.
I fancied you'd return the way you said, but I grow old, and I forgot your name. I think I made you up inside my head. I should have loved a thunderbird instead. At least when spring comes, they roar back again. I shut my eyes, and all the world drops dead. I shut my eyes, and all the world drops dead.
That was Mad Girl's Love by Sylvia Plath, read by Michael J. Rocco. Hall of Shadows is produced by Michael J. Rocco, directed by Kristina and Michael J. Rocco. For apparacity, we bid you good night. Thank you for choosing apparacity.com. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe. And if you are able to, donations can be made at hallofshadowsradio.com and apparacity.com. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Hall of Shadows.
A Vine on a House by Ambrose Bierce, read by Kristina Rocco.
About 3 miles from the little town of Norton, in Missouri, on the road leading to Maysville, stands an old house that was last occupied by a family named Harding. Since 1886, no one has lived in it, nor is anyone likely to live there again. time and the disfavor of persons dwelling thereabout are converting it into a rather picturesque ruin. An observer unacquainted with its history would hardly put it in the category of haunted houses. Yet, in all the region around, such is its evil reputation. Its windows are without glass, its doorways without doors. There are wide breaches in the shingle roof, and for lack of paint, the weatherboarding is a dun gray. But these unfailing signs of the supernatural are partly concealed and greatly softened by the abundant foliage of a large vine overrunning the entire structure. This vine, of a species which no botanist has ever been able to identify, has an important part in the story of the house. You see, the Harding family consisted of Robert Harding, his wife Matilda, Miss Julia West, who was her sister, and 2 young children. Robert Harding was a silent, cold-mannered man who made no friends in the neighborhood and apparently cared to make none. He was about 40 years old, frugal, industrious, and made a living from the little farm which is now overgrown with brushes and brambles. He and his sister-in-law were rather tabooed by their neighbors, whom seemed to think that they were seen too frequently together. Not entirely their fault, for at these times they evidently did not challenge observation. The moral code of rural Missouri is stern and exacting. Mrs. Harding was a gentle, sad-eyed woman, lacking a left foot. At some time in 1884, it became known that she had gone to visit her mother in Iowa. That was what her husband said, in reply to inquiries, and his manner of saying it did not encourage further questioning. She never came back, and 2 years later, without selling his farm or anything that was his, or appointing an agent to look after his interests, or removing his household goods, Harding, with the rest of the family, left the country. No one knew whither he went. Nobody at the time even cared. Naturally, whatever was movable about the place soon disappeared, and the deserted house became haunted in the manner of its kind. One summer evening, 4 or 5 years later, the Reverend J. Gruber of Norton, a Maysville attorney named Hyatt, met on horseback in front of the Harding place. Having business matters to discuss, they hitched their animals and going to the house sat on the porch to talk. Some humorous reference to the somber reputation of the place was made and forgotten as soon as uttered, and they talked of their business affairs until it grew almost dark. The evening was oppressively warm, the air stagnant. Presently both men started from their seats and stared in surprise. A long vine that covered half the front of the house and its dangled branches, dangling from the edge of the porch above them, was visibly and audibly agitated, shaking violently in every stem and leaf. "We shall have a storm," Hyatt exclaimed. Gruber said nothing, but silently directed the other's attention to the foliage of adjacent trees, which showed no movement at all. Even the delicate tips of the boughs silhouetted against the clear sky were motionless. They hastily passed down the steps to what had been a lawn and looked upward at the vine, whose entire length was now visible. It continued in violent agitation, yet they could discern no disturbing cause. "Let us leave," said the minister. And they did. Forgetting that they had been traveling in opposite directions, they rode away together. They went to Norton, where they related their strange experience to several discreet friends. The next evening, at about the same hour, accompanied by 2 others whose names are not recalled, they were again on the porch of the Harding house, and again the mysterious phenomenon occurred. The vine was violently agitated, while under the closest scrutiny from root to tip. Nor did their combined strength applied to the trunk serve to still it. After an hour's observation, they retreated, no less wise, it is thought, than when they had come. No great time was required for these singular facts to rouse the curiosity of the entire neighborhood. By day and by night, crowds of persons assembled at the Harding house, seeking a sign. It does not appear that any found it, yet so credible were the witnesses mentioned that no one doubted the reality of these manifestations. By either a happy inspiration or some destructive design, it was one day proposed. Nobody appeared to know from whom the suggestion came, but it was said to dig up the vine, and after a good deal of debate this was done. Nothing was found but the root, yet nothing could have been more strange. For 5 or 6 feet from the trunk, which had at the surface of the ground a diameter of several inches, it ran downward, single and straight, into a loose, friable earth. Then it divided and subdivided into rootlets, fibers, and filaments, most curiously interwoven. When carefully freed from soil, they showed a singular formation. In their ramifications and doublings back upon themselves, they made a compact network, having in size and shape an amazing resemblance to a human figure. Head, trunk, and limbs were there. Even the fingers and toes were distinctly defined, and many professed to see in the distribution and arrangement of the fibers in the globular mass representing the head a grotesque suggestion of a face. The figure was horizontal. The smaller roots had begun to unite at the breast. In point of resemblance to the human form, this image was imperfect. At about 10 inches from one of the knees, the cilia forming that leg had abruptly doubled backward and inward upon their course of growth. The figure lacked a left foot. There was but one inference, the obvious one. But in the ensuing excitement, as many courses of actions were proposed as there were incapable counselors. The matter was settled by the sheriff of the county, who, as the lawful custodian of the abandoned estate, ordered the root replaced and the excavation filled with the earth that had been removed. Later inquiry brought out only one fact of relevancy and significance. Mrs. Harding had never visited her relatives in Iowa, nor did they know that she was supposed to have done so. Of Robert Harding and the rest of his family, nothing is known. The house retains its evil reputation, but the replanted vine is as orderly and well-behaved a vegetable as a nervous person could wish to sit under of a pleasant night, when the katydids grate out their immemorial revelation, and the distant whippoorwill signifies his notion of what ought to be done about it.
Hall of Shadows is produced by Michael J. Rocco, directed by Kristina and Michael J. Rocco. For Apparacity, we bid you good night.